Let's say you've made a graph in a spreadsheet and you need to add a reference line to it. This is one of those things that seems like it should be so simple, but it requires such trickery that you might be yearning for simpler times. Hi, I'm Pamela Schultz, and in this video, we will be comparing adding a reference line to a graph using Excel to adding reference lines using DataGraph, a macOS application for data visualization, which solves problems like reference lines in such a way that we don't need any of that trickery anymore that we learned to use when we were trying to do things like that in spreadsheets. We will be using DataGraph version 5.5 for this demo, and you can get the file with the data and the result of what I'm going to make today from the DataGraph online examples. There will be essentially 3 sections to this video. The first section is where we're going to have a series of data and we add a static reference line to that data, some threshold that we want to compare our values to. Then we will go ahead and compute a mean value from that series of points. This will be a dynamic reference line on the same graph. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and see what happens when we add new data to both our spreadsheet versus our DataGraph file. Let's get started. I was partly inspired to do this video because I came across a blog post online that talked about how to add a reference line to a bar graph within Excel. And they either suggested just drawing a line over the graph, which is, I don't think, a good idea at all, and something they really didn't think was a good idea, but the process to add it so it actually reflected a specific value on the graph was multi-step. I'm going to show you what I've often done when I've had data that I've needed to add reference lines for. So in this example, we have a series of numbers and I have plotted these points and now I want to add a reference line. What you can do is you actually create kind of a fake table where you have your X values, the start and the end, and a Y column where the Y column is just whatever reference line you want to have shown. And I'm going to add that as a series to my graph. I also have to do formatting to now make this look like a line. And so it is here a multi-step process. Now let's compare this with DataGraph. Here I have my series of data in DataGraph. I can very easily select this column, add the points to my graph. It automatically picks up the X values as the built-in row counter. And then to add the reference line, there's a specific command that we've added just for adding lines that you can add to your graph. And within that command, just to add a single line, it's just a matter of typing in the number that you want that line to be drawn at. So it is a very simple thing to add a reference line to this graph. Now let's talk about adding another reference line where I want to show a mean value. If I'm in my spreadsheet, I need to compute the means. I can do that by selecting the range of this data. And the process of adding this as a reference line is going to be what I already showed you, selecting this as a series and adding this into my graph. I also at this point would really want to have a legend, so I can add a legend into this graph, and I may need to go into the series to update those labels with what I would like them to look like. Now let's go back into our DataGraph file. And to do this, I'm going to first compute the mean value here. And the quick way to do this is that I'm going to use a variable, and all I need to do is go to the column of my data. If I control click or right click, find the option where I'm going to get the number from this column, and I'm going to select a mean value that will create the mean variable. I can change the name of that if I like. And then back on my lines command, I can just take the one that I already made, copy and paste that. And once I have my command that I'm going to use to draw this line, I just type the name of the variable in there. So again, it's just a matter of right-clicking the column to create the variable that has the mean. I don't have to select any ranges here. It's just the column itself. And then I use another lines command to draw that reference line. I'll use a legend command to add a legend to this graph. Notice that for the lines command, there's not a default legend that's shown. Often you might want a reference line that doesn't have any label on it. But if you do want to have it in a legend, then you can just expand the command, and down at the bottom, you'll see where you can type in what you want shown in the legend. You'll see that again, by default, it's blank, but when we type something in, then that will immediately be shown in the legend for these two lines. Now let's do the last thing that I wanted to show you, which is what happens when we add more data. Let's actually do this one first in our DataGraph file and see what happens every time I add a new value into this column. Everything updates. My mean values update, my graph is updating, and my line is moving as the mean value is changing. If I do the same thing in my Excel file, then all the cell references that I've created are now not correct for this new longer column of values. I have to go ahead and change the reference to the region within the graph itself. I also have to make sure I change the mean value that's computed. And this is something that I think could really get you in trouble, because although there's a little warning here to let you know, it's something I think that's easy to miss. Thanks so much for watching. I really think this is a clear example of one of these things that feels like they should be easy, but if you're continuing to make your graphs in spreadsheets, then it's just kind of a tedious thing to do. And on top of that, has this potential for errors when you add or change the data that's in your graph. Whereas in DataGraph, not only is making the graph easy, but also adding these other elements is a really easy thing to do as well. If you have any suggestions for topics you would like us to tackle in this problem solved series, then we're happy to hear from you. You can leave a note in the comments of this video or email us help@visualdatatools.com.